had a pretty interesting childhood in a fish and chip shop in Richmond. It was before the huge migration came. So my family was in Richmond for a long time before that. So yeah, we were sort of like, not the wogs, but the fish and chip shop kid, you know. I was the fish and chip shop kid at school. Waitress used to bring me fish and chips at lunchtime. It was pretty good. I was a microbiologist at Kraft Foods. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't interested in it. The laboratory assistants were more interesting than the cheese. Because I wasn't really interested in microbiology, I was doing volunteer work with the Australian Greek Welfare Society as a youth worker. And I found that I was very effective in doing that because there was a lot of young Greek kids in Richmond at the time, because Richmond became a place of first settlement for migrants. And I sort of knew what they were going through because I'd been through it a generation earlier. And so I was able to articulate their needs to a system like local government, social welfare, who'd say, well, if you can't speak English, we can't help you, mate. I had a girlfriend and I started writing a diary, and she had an affair with someone else and tried to convince me that polygamy was a good thing. Polyamory, as they call it these days. When I left microbiology, I opened a cafe in Melbourne, in Lonsdale Street. And I started writing poetry, and then these poets, the street poets and the anarchist poets, Pio, Tom the Street Poet, Anya Wolwitz, Jas H. Duke, all these Melbourne poets who'd been reading their poetry and performing their poetry since the 1970s, came and asked if they could have a poetry reading at my coffee shop. So I started listening to them, and I thought, shit, you know, I'm writing this stuff in my diary. And so I started reading a few diary entries out and started liking the fact that people can respond immediately to what you've written. So you can see the response in the audience. You put the poem out there and the audience responds to it. My first inspiration was my grandmother. She was my babysitter. She'd sit me on her knee and she'd tell me stories. She'd make them up, stories she'd remembered. She was a great poet. She used to write verse at weddings and at christenings and things about everybody that was involved in the bridal party, the best man, the groomsmen, the bridesmaids, and she'd just make it up on the spot. She was like a freestyle rapper, but to Greek rhythm. There's similar sort of stuff happening in New South Wales, but there's not a lifestyle poetry scene like you get in Melbourne. The Dan, I've only been going for 21 years, but I first performed in 1983 when the Melbourne Folk Club was there every Thursday night, and they had an open stage, and I got up and said, can I read a poem? And they said, okay, and I became a regular attender of the Folk Club. At the Dan, that's like a sort of more social event, something, you know, where I share recent writings or old favourites with you know, poets that I admire, and I like to hear what they've been doing. And the Dan's sort of a weekly thing where you catch up with other poets. It's sort of like a poetry reading for poets. Most of the people in the audience are going to get up and do something. So it's more of a sharing. And funnily enough, it's like a family. Lots of people come there because it's accepting. You know, it doesn't matter what strata of society you're from. People accept your work and accept you. You know, there's people, well, me too, I don't exclude myself from this, who live for Saturday afternoon at the Dan. That's what they look forward to in their life. Depending on what order I am in the list, I could have gargled a few whiskies by the time I get up. But if I'm doing a professional gig, like a 20-minute set, or you know, something at a writers' festival or something where people pay me good money to perform, I don't usually drink before I get on stage. I feel the love because I know I can communicate with an audience, and I enjoy presenting something to an audience that they're going to enjoy. It's my community. I come here every week to see my community of lifestyle type poets. Mainly at the Dan, it's people who like being a poet, even if it pays no money, even if they don't earn from it. They're poets. It gives me eternity in my atoms. I'm KOMNINOS, the poet, and I do poetry, and I love it.